Sarah hadn't intended to answer the 3:03 a.m. call. The graveyard shift at Midwest Customer Solutions was typically uneventful. Intermittent insomnia-fueled grievances about malfunctioning appliances or billing discrepancies punctuated the silence. She had embraced the night shift 6 months prior, following David's untimely death. The nocturnal hours served as a shield, warding off the morning calls from well-meaning friends whose clumsy condolences about her fiancé's sudden demise mere weeks before their wedding felt unbearably awkward. The ring she couldn't bring herself to remove caught the harsh fluorescent light as she fixated on line 3's incessant blinking. Just yesterday, she had discovered David's final voicemail on her old phone. "Hey love, running late at St. Augustine's. Had to help Father Michael with some paperwork for the ceremony. The old guy's intense about marriage vows, but I guess that's why everyone says his couples last forever, right? See you at home." She never heard from him again. Later that night, she dreamt of David standing at their intended wedding altar, his ring emanating a coal-like glow. "Forever," he'd murmured, his voice layered with echoes. "Isn't long enough." She awoke to find their wedding invitation chart at the edges, despite not having kept any in the apartment. A fragment of memory stirred, an old tale her grandmother used to recount about midnight phone calls from the deceased, how they'd implore you to stay on the line just a little longer, cherishing a few more precious moments of connection. Sarah had dismissed those stories until the night following David's funeral, when her phone rang at midnight. She had hurried to answer it, heart pounding, but only static greeted her. Her fingers moved before her brain could intervene. "Thank you for calling MCS. This is Sarah. How may I assist you today?" The line crackled ominously. Initially, she presumed it was mere interference, but then she discerned them. Two voices, scarcely above a whisper, harmonizing perfectly. The sound made her skin tingle, akin to ice forming on a windowpane. "My love, my eternal love." Sarah's chest constricted. The voices were tender, intimate, but wrong. Each syllable seemed stretched, distorted, as if the speakers were being slowly torn apart even as they reached for each other. She imagined taffy being pulled, sinews stretching beyond their breaking points. "I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you clearly. Could you please? Forever and ever and ever and ever." The whispers intensified, growing more urgent, more agonized. Sarah's hand trembled as she reached for the supervisor alert button. Then she heard it, the third voice. It didn't emanate from the phone speaker, but resonated directly within her bones, ancient and dreadful as church bells at midnight. "Enough." The line went dead, leaving behind the scent of burnt roses and copper. "You answered it, didn't you?" Marcus, the shift supervisor, stood in her cubicle doorway, his dark skin ashen under the fluorescent lights. His hand shook as he gripped his coffee cup, and Sarah noticed old burn marks encircling his wrists, as though someone had once bound him with rings of fire. Sarah nodded, still trembling. What was that?" Marcus sank into the spare chair beside her desk, the plastic creaking under his weight. "It started 3 months ago. Always the same time, always line 3. Jenny Thompson was the first to answer it." He paused, running a hand over his face. "She disappeared the next day. Car in the parking lot, purse on her desk, just gone. But she left something behind. A single black rose, its petals burnt around the edges, and a wedding ring that was hot to the touch." "And the others?" "2 more. Both gone within 24 hours of answering." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "We tried everything, call tracking, recording devices, bringing in the police. But the number changes every time, and the recordings, they're just static. Except," he glanced around nervously, "except when you play them backward. Then you hear wedding bells and screaming." Marcus rolled up his sleeves, revealing the full extent of the burn marks. They weren't random. They formed perfect circles, like wedding bands seared into flesh. "I tried to help one of the couples," he whispered. "Last month, I heard the whispers coming from the break room. Found two of our day shift workers, Amy and Michael, just engaged, holding hands and walking toward the exit like sleepwalkers. I grabbed them, tried to pull them apart." His voice cracked. "The rings of fire just appeared, burning into my skin. When I came to, they were gone." Their bodies turned up 3 days later in front of St. Augustine's, still holding hands, their fingers fused together. Sarah glanced at her watch. 3:47 a.m. "Why hasn't anyone shut down the line?" Management tried. Disconnected all the phones at 3 a.m. for a week. Marcus's eyes darted to the ceiling cameras. The calls came through anyway. And now they're getting more frequent. Last night, line 3 lit up at 9 p.m. I answered it myself, but hung up before they could finish. Been feeling burning in my wrists ever since. Sarah shouldn't have returned the next night, but rent was due and good jobs were scarce. Besides, she told herself, lightning never strikes twice. Yet, as she drove to work, an unsettling sensation lingered, the feeling that something was trailing her. Every red light revealed glimpses of rogue figures in her rearview mirror. Every passing church seemed to toll its bells in greeting. At 3:03 a.m., all the phones went dead except line 3. She stared at the blinking light, recalling Marcus's warning. But something gnawed at her. Those voices weren't threatening. They sounded trapped, desperate. Like lovers reaching across an insurmountable divide, yearning for one last touch. The light continued blinking. Sarah accessed the call center's database, her hands trembling as patterns emerged. 3 disappearances, all following 3:03 a.m. calls. But what about the calls no one answered? As she delved deeper, phones began to ring and die around her like distant wedding bells. In the flickering fluorescent light, shadows congregated in empty cubicles, couples locked in eternal embrace, their faces turned toward her with hungry anticipation. And there, in the records from 6 months ago, a single call at 3:03 a.m. the night David disappeared, answered by Father Michael himself. Her blood ran cold. Every unanswered call corresponded with a missing persons report in the city. Not call center employees, random citizens. Always couples, always found 3 days later, their bodies contorted in expressions of eternal agony, lips frozen in whispers of love. And always wearing matching wedding rings that seemed to glow from within. The light blinked faster. Sarah's fingers hovered over the phone. If she was right, not answering could doom someone else. But answering. She thought of Marcus's burnt wrists, of Ginny's scorched rose, of her grandmother's warnings about midnight calls. She picked up. The whispers began immediately, more desperate than before. Heat radiated from the handset, and Sarah could smell burning plastic. "Please, help us, love trapped, eternal, burning." Sarah's heart raced. "Who are you? What happened to you?" "Love, promised, forever." The voices cracked with pain. He made sure, never part. The binding father, his ceremonies of flame. Who did this? The third voice boomed through the line, shaking the desk. The temperature in the room plummeted, and Sarah watched frost patterns form on her screen, delicate swirls resembling wedding bands. They were unfaithful. But this time, Sarah was prepared. She had routed the call through every tracking system they had, running multiple traces simultaneously. As the voice thundered, her computer pinged a location. St. Augustine's Cathedral, abandoned decades ago after a series of mysterious deaths. Once renowned for its midnight wedding ceremonies, now a hollow shell of blackened stone on the town's edge. They sought to break their vows. The voice continued. Sarah recognized it now, the cadence of old sermon recordings, of fire and brimstone preachers promising eternal damnation. I granted their wish for eternal love. By torturing them? Sarah's voice trembled with anger. That's not love. Silence enveloped the room. Then, gradually, the voice transformed, became closer, more tangible. Sarah smelled incense and charred flesh. You dare question my authority? I who have bound more souls than any mortal priest. I who have ensured that till death do us part becomes not even in death. Sarah's screen flickered, displaying security camera footage from St. Augustine's. Couples knelt before the altar, hands clasped, as a robed figure conducted ceremonies that grew darker, more twisted over the years. The priest's prayers mutated into curses, his blessing water became liquid fire, his rings transformed into brands that seared flesh and soul together. You wish to understand? The voice permeated everywhere now, reverberating through the building's foundations. Then join my congregation. The fluorescent lights exploded. In the darkness, Sarah saw him, the binding father, his ceremonial robes writhing with shadows, hands raised in benediction as flames danced between his fingers. Behind him, countless couples knelt in eternal embrace, their faces masks of loving agony. She ran. The night air slapped her like a wall, but she didn't stop. Her car refused to start. The key burned her fingers upon touch, so she sprinted toward St. Augustine's. She knew she should flee, but David's last words echoed in her mind. If anything ever happens to us, he'd told her once, if you ever need to let go, I'd understand. Love shouldn't be a cage. Now those words propelled her forward like a beacon. Someone had to break this cycle, had to demonstrate that true love required the strength to release as well as hold on. The streets twisted unnaturally, each turn bringing her closer to the cathedral's imposing spires. She could hear phones ringing in every house she passed, see couples stirring in their sleep, drawn by the call of eternal love. In a second-floor window, she glimpsed Amy and Michael from the day's shift, their hands already reaching for each other, their new engagement rings beginning to glow. Wait! She tried to shout, but her voice was drowned by the tolling of phantom wedding bells. The cathedral doors swung open at her touch. Inside, cool air rushed past her, carrying the scent of roses and ash. As her eyes adjusted, she saw them, not just couples, but rings of salt and holy water on the floor, remnants of someone's failed attempt to break the curse. Hope fluttered in her chest as she spotted an ancient book lying open near the altar, its pages filled with counter-rituals and ceremonies of unbinding. But before she could reach it, the candles ignited with black flame. The air turned thick and hot, revealing horrors in waves, couples frozen mid-embrace, their bodies fused like melted wax, faces emerging from stone walls in eternal screams of ecstasy, shadows writhing overhead in the shape of clasped hands. Near the front pew, Amy and Michael reached for her with burning fingers, their wedding rings pulsing with unholy light. Then she saw him, David, trapped among the congregation, his face a blend of agony and bliss. Sarah, he whispered, I finally understand. This is what true love means. The book burst into flames as the binding father emerged from the shadows. His robes rippled with captured souls, but when he turned, Sarah saw not a monster but a man's face, aged and lined with ancient grief. I was like you once, he said softly. Young, believing love could survive anything. Then I watched my wife leave me for another, saw their happiness built on the ruins of our vows. His voice cracked, suddenly human. I prayed for guidance, for understanding. And in my darkest moment, I found ancient texts speaking of rituals to make love truly eternal. The binding father's form flickered, and for a moment Sarah saw him as he must have been, a parish priest with kind eyes, who had wanted only to help couples keep their promises. The first time was an accident, he whispered. They came to me in tears, saying they couldn't stay together. I had the rings blessed with the old rites, thinking it would strengthen their bond. His face twisted. When they tried to remove the rings later, the fire began. Their screams, but their love, oh, their love became perfect. Eternal. Pure. He reached toward Sarah with trembling hands. Sometimes, in the silence between calls, I hear them crying. But isn't that better than the pain of broken vows? Of watching love die slowly, poisoned by time and temptation? His eyes searched her face, almost pleading. You understand, don't you? You, who still wear his ring. Welcome to my church, he said, spreading arms wrapped in shadow, where love truly lasts forever. Sarah saw Ginny Thompson among the congregation, locked in an embrace that was both ecstasy and torture. Saw Marcus too, his burnt wrists finally explained. He tried to pull a couple apart, to break their eternal bond. You can't keep doing this, Sarah said, backing away. Love isn't meant to be a prison. The binding father laughed, and the sound was like burning metal on bone. But isn't that exactly what they pray for? Forever and ever, till death do us part. I simply ensure they keep their vows. He raised his hands, and the flame soared higher. Sarah felt the heat on her back, saw more couples materializing from the shadows, reaching for each other with burning hands as they whispered their eternal love. Sarah lunged for the burning book, fingers closing around a single page as it crumbled to ash. The counter-ritual's words seared into her mind. In rings of gold we bind our love. In rings of fire we seal our fate. What burns eternal may be quenched by tears of true release. Her hands shaking, she began to recite. By choice we came together, by choice we must. The words sparked on her tongue like electricity, and she saw the nearest couple's rings flicker, their eternal embraces loosening for just a moment. Amy and Michael's fingers began to separate, their faces showing the first hint of awareness she'd seen. But then the binding father's scream of rage filled the cathedral. No! His form swelled, shadows writhing. They are mine. Their love is perfect. Yet in his thundering voice, Sarah heard something else, fear. Fear that his carefully constructed prison of perfect devotion might crumble if couples remembered they had a choice. She understood then. The rings could only be broken by willing surrender, by lovers choosing to let go. The binding father hadn't just trapped these couples in eternal devotion. He'd stripped them of love's most essential truth, the courage to set each other free. The heat rose around her as David reached out with burning hands. His face flickered between agony and ecstasy, and Sarah saw their entire relationship play across his features. Their first date, the proposal, the quiet moments that had made their love real. Join us, he pleaded. Complete our vows. Make our love eternal. The binding father's form wavered again, and for a moment she saw tears on his human face. Please, he whispered, don't make me watch another love die. But his hands were already rising, flames dancing between his fingers. Sarah looked into his eyes, seeing not the man she'd loved but a puppet of twisted devotion. The ring on her finger grew hot, but she didn't remove it. Instead, she held his gaze and whispered, real love means knowing when to let go. She slipped off her engagement ring and pressed it into his burning palm. For just a moment, the fire in his eyes dimmed, replaced by recognition and, perhaps, gratitude. She pulled out her phone, still connected to the call center system, and pressed record. If someone else answered the 303 call, they would hear her final message. The rings are his power, but they can only be broken by choice. Tell the couples to let go. Love isn't meant to burn for. The binding father's scream of rage drowned her words, as flames erupted from every wedding band in the cathedral. The last thing Sarah saw was David's face, something like recognition flickering in his burning eyes. The police found her car in the parking lot the next morning, engine still warm. On her desk, they found pages of research, stories of St. Augustine's Cathedral, of the binding father, who disappeared after his ceremonies grew too dark, of ancient rites promising to bind souls for eternity. In her drawer, they found a single black rose and a wedding ring that no one could touch. Marcus stood in her empty cubicle, staring at her final notes. She'd been so close to understanding, to maybe even stopping it. The scars on his wrists burned as he reached for her phone, intending to disconnect it. 3:03 p.m. Line 3 began to ring. He thought of Sarah's last message about willing surrender, about the courage to let go. His fingers trembled over the receiver as he remembered Amy and Michael. How for just a moment, when he tried to pull them apart, he'd seen recognition in their eyes, saw their hands almost separate before the burning rings dragged them back together. 3 voices whispered in perfect harmony. "My love, my eternal love." Marcus picked up the phone. "Sometimes," he said into the receiver, his voice steady, "love means having the strength to say goodbye." In St. Augustine's Cathedral, something stirred in the shadows, and the sound of breaking rings echoed like bells. In St. Augustine's Cathedral, beneath centuries of dust and decay, the congregation grows. They kneel in rows before the altar that burns with unholy flame, bodies twisted in eternal embrace, faces frozen in expressions of rapturous agony. The binding Father moves among them, his robes flowing with shadows, blessing their unending union as their souls burn with the pure fire of undying love. And in the call center, line 3 keeps ringing, waiting for someone else to answer, to join the congregation of eternal, agonizing love. Those who walk past St. Augustine's at night say they can hear phones ringing in the bell tower, and sometimes see flames dancing behind the stained glass windows. But no one dares to answer, no one except the desperate souls working the graveyard shift at Midwest Customer Solutions, where line 3 still blinks every night at 3:03, promising connection, promising love, promising forever. The morning sun struggled to penetrate the heavy curtains of the Midwest Customer Solutions office, casting long shadows across the empty cubicles. Marcus stood alone in Sarah's vacant workspace, the weight of her disappearance pressing down on him like the oppressive heat of a midsummer night. Her final notes lay scattered on the desk, pages filled with frantic scribbles about St. Augustine's Cathedral and the binding Father. He picked up her phone, its screen still displaying the last recorded message before the system shut down. Determined to uncover the truth, Marcus began poring over Sarah's research. The more he read, the deeper he plunged into a labyrinth of forgotten rituals and ancient curses. The binding Father wasn't just a malevolent spirit. He was a man driven by heartbreak and twisted love, his sorrow transforming him into something dark and vengeful. The stories spoke of a ritual that could sever the eternal bonds he imposed, but the instructions were cryptic, scattered across fragmented texts. Late that night, Marcus received an unexpected visitor, a woman cloaked in shadows, her presence barely noticeable in the dimly lit office. She introduced herself as Eliza, a historian who had dedicated her life to studying the legends surrounding St. Augustine's Cathedral. Her eyes held a mix of fear and determination, mirroring Marcus's own resolve. "Sarah stumbled upon something," Eliza whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the office machines. "She found a way to disrupt the binding Father's hold, but it wasn't enough. He's adapting, becoming more powerful with each disrupted call." Together, they devised a plan to confront the binding Father. Armed with Sarah's notes and Eliza's historical knowledge, they realized that the key to breaking the curse lay within the cathedral itself. The ritual required not just knowledge, but immense courage, something Marcus wasn't sure he possessed. As midnight approached, they made their way to the abandoned cathedral, its towering spires silhouetted against the starless sky. The air was thick with an eerie silence, broken only by the distant tolling of unseen bells. Inside, the atmosphere was oppressive, the once grand hall now a decaying shell of its former glory. Flickering candles cast grotesque shadows on the walls, and the scent of burnt roses lingered in the air. Eliza led Marcus to the altar, where an ancient book lay open, its pages yellowed and brittle. "This is the counter-ritual," she explained. "But we need to perform it precisely. Any mistake could strengthen his hold." As they began reciting the incantation, the temperature plummeted. The Binding Father's presence surged, his voice echoing through the cathedral. "You cannot undo what has been done. Love is eternal," he declared, his form materializing from the shadows, eyes burning with an unholy light. Marcus felt a surge of fear but pressed on, his voice steady despite the terror clawing at his heart. The ritual required them to confront their deepest fears and let go of their pasts. Memories of lost loves and broken promises flooded their minds, threatening to pull them into the Binding Father's dark embrace. With each verse, the Binding Father weakened, his form flickering like a dying flame. But just as hope began to surge, the ground trembled, and the cathedral seemed to come alive with the screams of trapped souls. The Binding Father, desperate to maintain his control, unleashed a torrent of spectral energy, forcing Marcus and Eliza to flee. Breathless and shaken, they escaped the cathedral as dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight dispelling the lingering darkness. Though the immediate threat was quelled, they knew the battle was far from over. The Binding Father was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the next call to ensnare another soul. Weeks passed since Marcus and Eliza's harrowing encounter at St. Augustine's Cathedral. The Midwest Customer Solutions office remained eerily quiet, the legend of Line 3 overshadowed by the tangible fear that now gripped its employees. Rumors circulated about Marcus's disappearance and the strange occurrences that followed, but no one dared to speak openly about the supernatural forces at play. Eliza continued her research, delving deeper into the ancient texts and uncovering references to the Silent Watcher, a guardian spirit bound to protect the balance between the living and the dead. According to the legends, the Silent Watcher could either aid or hinder those who sought to disrupt the Binding Father's curse, depending on their intentions and purity of heart. One night, as Marcus combed through old church records, he stumbled upon a faded photograph of Father Michael, the same priest mentioned in David's last voicemail. The image showed him alongside a group of couples, all smiling beneath the cathedral's ornate arches. Beneath the photo, a single line was inscribed, "In love, we find eternity." Realizing the significance of Father Michael's involvement, Marcus reached out to Eliza. They theorized that Father Michael might hold the key to understanding how the Binding Father's curse was initiated and how it could be permanently broken. Their only lead pointed them to a secluded library in a neighboring town, home to rare manuscripts and forgotten lore. The library was a relic from another era, its vast halls lined with dusty books and shadowed alcoves. As they navigated the labyrinthine corridors, the air grew thick with the weight of untold secrets. Finally, they discovered a hidden chamber behind a bookshelf, revealing a collection of journals belonging to Father Michael. The journals detailed Father Michael's descent into obsession after his wife's untimely death. He had sought solace in ancient rituals, believing that binding souls together could prevent loss and heartbreak. His experiments inadvertently summoned the Binding Father, transforming his noble intentions into a nightmarish reality. The Binding Father had turned Father Michael into a pawn, forcing him to perpetuate the curse in an endless cycle of forced unions. Determined to find a way to free Father Michael and end the Binding Father's reign, Marcus and Eliza followed the journal's instructions to create a beacon, a ritual artifact that could amplify their counter-ritual and summon the Silent Watcher for assistance. The process was intricate, requiring rare components and precise timing. On the night of the new moon, they returned to St. Augustine's Cathedral, carrying the beacon with them. The cathedral awaited, its darkened halls whispering with the anguish of countless trapped souls. As they set up the beacon at the altar, the air shimmered with anticipation. They began the counter-ritual once more, their voices intertwining in a desperate plea for salvation. The beacon activated, emitting a radiant light that pierced the darkness, drawing the attention of the silent watcher. The guardian spirit manifested as a luminous figure, eyes serene yet sorrowful. "Why do you seek to undo the Binding Father's work?" the silent watcher inquired, its voice resonating with ancient wisdom. Marcus stepped forward, explaining their quest to free the trapped souls and end the Binding Father's curse. "We believe that true love requires the freedom to choose, not eternal bondage," he pleaded. The silent watcher regarded them thoughtfully before nodding. "Your intentions are pure. To break the cycle, you must confront the Binding Father together, united in your resolve. Only then can his hold be shattered." With the silent watcher's guidance, Marcus and Eliza felt a surge of strength and clarity. The beacon amplified their connection, creating a harmonious energy that countered the Binding Father's dark magic. As they continued the ritual, the Binding Father emerged once more, his fury palpable. "You cannot defy love's eternal bond," he roared, the cathedral trembling under his wrath. But this time, Marcus and Eliza stood firm, their voices unwavering. The silent watcher joined their chant, its light intertwining with theirs to form a protective barrier. The Binding Father's form began to waver, his power diminishing under the combined force of their united hearts. In a final, desperate attempt, the Binding Father unleashed a torrent of spectral energy, but the beacon held strong. The silent watcher's light enveloped him, purging the darkness and severing the cursed bonds he had imposed. With a final, anguished scream, the Binding Father's form dissipated, his reign of terror finally ended. As the echoes of the ritual faded, the trapped souls began to ascend, their expressions serene and grateful. Father Michael's spirit appeared, his eyes filled with peace. "Thank you," he whispered before fading into the light. The cathedral, once a place of horror, now radiated with a tranquil energy. The curse was broken, and the silent watcher withdrew, its duty fulfilled. Marcus and Eliza stood together, the weight of their journey lifting as dawn broke, casting a golden glow over the horizon. With the Binding Father's curse lifted, the Midwest Customer Solutions office gradually returned to normalcy. The eerie occurrences ceased, and the once blinking Line 3 fell silent, its dark legacy finally put to rest. Yet, the scars of the past lingered, etched into the memories of those who had witnessed the supernatural horrors firsthand. Marcus and Eliza became the unsung heroes of the office, their bravery whispered about in hushed tones during the long night shifts. But peace was short-lived. Unbeknownst to them, the remnants of the Binding Father's dark magic had left an indelible mark, subtly influencing the very fabric of the call center. One evening, as Marcus reviewed the office's security footage, he noticed something unsettling. In the grainy video, shadows seemed to move independently, dancing across the walls in unnatural patterns. Figures appeared in the reflection of the glass doors, couples locked in an eternal embrace, their faces twisted in silent agony. The footage froze, revealing the faint outline of a figure watching from the darkness, its presence barely perceptible but undeniably sinister. Determined to uncover the truth, Marcus delved deeper into the remnants of the Binding Father's magic. He consulted with Eliza, who suggested that the curse, though broken, had fragmented itself, scattering pieces of dark energy throughout the call center. These fragments could potentially reassemble, reigniting the curse if left unchecked. Their investigation led them to an old storage room, hidden behind a false wall in the back of the office. Inside, they discovered remnants of the Binding Father's influence, burnt roses, charred wedding rings, and remnants of the dark rituals they had fought to end. At the center of the room lay an ancient artifact, pulsating with a faint, malevolent energy. Eliza recognized it from the journals. A heart of binding, a powerful relic that had been the source of the Binding Father's strength. Realizing its significance, They knew they had to destroy it to prevent any lingering dark magic from resurging. However, as they approached the artifact, the temperature in the room dropped sharply. The shadows coalesced, forming the spectral figure of the Binding Father once more. "You cannot destroy what is eternal," he intoned, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Love, once bound, cannot be unbound." Marcus and Eliza stood their ground, understanding that the Binding Father was not just a spirit, but an embodiment of twisted love and obsession. To defeat him, they had to confront the very essence of what he represented. Drawing upon the lessons learned during their previous battle, they initiated a new ritual, this time aimed at purifying the heart of binding. The process required them to channel their pure intentions and collective strength, transforming the dark energy into a force of healing and release. As they began the incantation, the Binding Father fought back, his presence overwhelming the room with waves of despair and sorrow. Memories of lost loves and unfulfilled promises surged around them, threatening to pull them into the darkness. But Marcus and Eliza, united in their purpose, focused on their mission to liberate both themselves and the trapped souls. The ritual reached its climax as the heart of binding shattered, releasing a burst of radiant light that dispelled the remaining darkness. The Binding Father's spirit, now stripped of its malicious intent, looked upon them with a mixture of sadness and gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered before dissolving into the ether, his final essence merging with the purified energy. With the artifact destroyed, the call center was finally free from any lingering curses. The shadows dissipated, and the air cleared, leaving behind a sense of peace and closure. Marcus and Eliza knew that their work was not yet done. They had to ensure that no remnants of dark magic remained, safeguarding the office against any future threats. In the weeks that followed, they implemented protective measures, integrating ancient symbols and protective wards into the building's infrastructure. The office returned to its mundane operations, but the bond between Marcus and Eliza had deepened, forged through their shared ordeal. One night, as they worked side by side, Eliza glanced at Marcus, a hint of a smile on her lips. "We did it," she said softly. Marcus nodded, his eyes reflecting the flickering lights of the office. "Yes, we did. But let's never forget the lessons we've learned." As dawn approached, the call center remained silent, its dark history now a closed chapter. Yet, deep within the shadows, a faint whisper lingered, a reminder that love, in its purest form, held the power to both create and destroy. And in the quiet moments between shifts, those who worked the graveyard hours would occasionally catch a glimpse of a flickering light or hear the distant echo of wedding bells, a testament to the eternal struggle between light and darkness, love and obsession. Months had passed since Marcus and Eliza vanquished the Binding Father and dismantled the heart of binding. The Midwest Customer Solutions office thrived once more, its nightly operations smooth and uneventful. The nightmare that had once plagued the call center seemed like a distant memory, relegated to whispered stories told in the hushed corners of the break room. However, beneath the surface of their restored normalcy, subtle changes began to emerge. Employees reported fleeting sensations of being watched, shadows that moved against the natural flow of light, and occasional glimpses of spectral figures vanishing into thin air. The incidents were sporadic, easily dismissed as stress or fatigue, until a new pattern began to surface. One chilly December night, as the office settled into its usual rhythm, the lights flickered ominously. Line 3, which had been silent since the Binding Father's defeat, suddenly sprang to life, its screen glowing with an unnatural intensity. The familiar automated voice greeted the caller, but this time, it carried a tone of desperation. "Please, help us, trapped, eternal." Marcus, now the unofficial guardian of the call center's dark secrets, felt a chill run down his spine. He had hoped the horrors were over, but the resurgence of Line 3 indicated that something still lingered, a remnant of the Binding Father's influence that had not been entirely eradicated. Determined to investigate, Marcus sought out Eliza, who had continued her studies into protective rituals and spiritual phenomena. Together, they revisited the cathedral's records, uncovering a forgotten chapter about the eternal bond, a fail-safe spell designed to prevent the binding father from ever being fully destroyed. It was a safeguard, ensuring that his influence could reemerge if the heart of binding was ever threatened. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Marcus and Eliza knew they had to act swiftly. The resurgence of Line 3 meant that the binding father, or a fragment of his essence, was attempting to regain his power by reconnecting with the living. Each answered call risked pulling another soul into his eternal embrace. Their research led them to an obscure text detailing the veil of separation, a ritual that could reinforce the boundaries between the living and the dead, ensuring that no spirit could cross over without consent. However, the ritual required a powerful conduit, something or someone with a deep emotional connection to both worlds. As they prepared for the ritual, the office grew increasingly restless. Phones rang at odd hours, and the air was thick with an oppressive energy. One night, as Marcus worked late, the phone rang at exactly 3:03 a.m. The automated voice, now more insistent, echoed through the empty office. "Love cannot let go." Ignoring his instincts, Marcus answered the call, his voice steady but wary. "This is Marcus. How may I assist you?" A familiar whisper replied. "Release us, help us find peace." Determined to save any remaining souls, Marcus and Eliza initiated the veil of separation ritual. They set up the conduit, an ancient mirror rumored to reflect the true nature of spirits. As they began the incantation, the office transformed around them. The fluorescent lights dimmed, and a spectral fog enveloped the room, the boundary between the living and the dead blurring. From the mirror, apparitions began to emerge, couples locked in eternal embraces, their faces etched with sorrow and longing. The binding father's presence loomed larger, his form more substantial than ever, driven by the lingering fragments of his malevolent will. "Why do you resist?" he demanded, his voice a blend of anger and despair. "Love is meant to last forever," Eliza responded, her voice resonating with authority and compassion. "True love honors the freedom to choose, to let go when necessary. Your eternal bonds are a prison, not a sanctuary." The binding father's form wavered, struggling against the veil of separation. "You cannot undo what has been written. Our love is eternal." But Marcus and Eliza pressed on, their combined voices forming a harmonious plea for liberation. The mirror shimmered, its surface reflecting not just the apparitions, but also the pure intentions behind the ritual. The veil of separation began to solidify, creating an unbreakable barrier that nullified the binding father's influence. In a final, desperate act, the binding father unleashed a surge of dark energy, attempting to shatter the veil. But the ritual's power held firm, and the light from the mirror intensified, engulfing the dark spirit. With a piercing scream that echoed through the office, the binding father's essence was finally eradicated, his hold over the call center broken for good. As the spectral fog dissipated, the office returned to its usual state, the oppressive energy lifted. The phones ceased their haunting rings, and the lingering shadows faded into nothingness. Marcus and Eliza stood together, exhausted but victorious, knowing that their relentless efforts had finally brought peace to both the living and the dead. In the aftermath, the Midwest Customer Solutions office installed enhanced protective wards, ensuring that no such dark magic could ever threaten them again. The story of Sarah, Marcus, Eliza, and the binding father became a testament to the power of love, courage, and the unyielding human spirit. As the years passed, the events of the past became a legend, shared among employees as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked obsession and the importance of letting go. Yet, every so often, someone would catch a glimpse of a flickering light or hear the faint echo of wedding bells, a reminder that even in the most ordinary places, the extraordinary can still linger, waiting for the right moment to resurface. Years had passed since the Midwest Customer Solutions office had triumphed over the Binding Father and his cursed Line 3. The building had been renovated, incorporating modern security systems and protective wards designed to prevent any supernatural interference. Life had returned to normal, with employees working the night shifts without a hint of the dark history that once haunted them. However, the tranquility was not to last. Unbeknownst to Marcus and Eliza, remnants of the Binding Father's essence had survived the final ritual, seeping into the very foundation of the building. These fragments lay dormant, biding their time, waiting for the right conditions to re-emerge. One chilly winter night, as the office prepared for the holiday season, a new employee named Daniel joined the call center. Fresh out of college, Daniel was eager to start his first job, unaware of the building's haunted past. His cheerful demeanor and inquisitive nature made him a favorite among his colleagues, but he often felt a strange unease, as if unseen eyes watched his every move. As December deepened, the office was adorned with festive decorations, twinkling lights, garlands, and a large Christmas tree in the lobby. Marcus, now a seasoned protector of the office's secrets, kept a vigilant eye on the subtle signs of supernatural activity. Eliza continued her studies, ensuring that the protective wards remained intact and researching ways to further fortify their defenses. One night, just days before Christmas, a fierce storm rolled in, bringing with it howling winds and torrential rain. The storm's fury battered the building, causing power fluctuations that disrupted the office's systems. Amidst the chaos, Line 3 flickered back to life, its screen glowing ominously at 3:03 a.m. once more. Daniel, working the night shift, was the first to notice the anomaly. His phone rang, the screen displaying the infamous Line 3 number. Heart pounding, he hesitated before answering, recalling the office's cautionary tales. "Hello, Midwest Customer Solutions. This is Daniel. How may I assist you? Help us, trapped in." The voice trailed off, leaving an unsettling silence. Daniel's mind raced as he glanced around the empty office, the storm outside intensifying. Meanwhile, Marcus and Eliza sensed the resurgence of dark energy. They rushed to the office, finding Daniel visibly shaken by the mysterious call. "It's Line 3, he stammered. I answered, and then everything went silent. Determined to prevent history from repeating itself, Marcus and Eliza began investigating the cause of the resurgence. Their research led them to a forgotten passage beneath the building, a network of old tunnels that predated the current office structure. According to Eliza's findings, the Binding Father's essence had infiltrated these subterranean passages, using them as conduits to siphon power from the building's infrastructure. Venturing into the tunnels, the trio navigated the labyrinthine corridors, their path illuminated by flickering torches. The air was thick with malevolent energy, and whispers echoed through the darkness, attempting to lure them deeper into the abyss. As they delved further, they discovered an ancient chamber adorned with symbols reminiscent of the Binding Father's dark rituals. At the center stood an altar, upon which lay a tarnished heart of binding, the very artifact they had destroyed years ago. However, this one pulsed with a corrupted energy, a dark reflection of its former self. Before they could act, the Binding Father manifested once more, his form now even more formidable, fed by the fragmented essence he had left behind. "You cannot destroy what is eternal," he declared, his voice resonating through the chamber. "Love is my legacy." Marcus and Eliza prepared to perform the veil of separation ritual again, but this time they faced an intensified foe. The Binding Father's power had grown, nourished by the storm's energy and the building's infrastructure. To counter him, they needed to harness the collective will of everyone who had been touched by his curse. those who had survived and broken free. Realizing the magnitude of their task, Marcus reached out to former employees who had faced the Binding Father's wrath. Through a series of urgent communications, they gathered a group of willing participants, each bringing their own strength and determination to the fight. United by their shared experiences, they formed a circle around the altar, their combined voices rising in a harmonious chant. Eliza directed the ritual, guiding the participants to focus their positive emotions, love, hope, and the desire for freedom. The veil of separation ritual now required not just the efforts of two, but the collective power of many to overcome the Binding Father's enhanced defenses. As the ritual progressed, the chamber shook violently, the Binding Father unleashing a torrent of dark energy in retaliation. Shadows writhed and twisted, attempting to ensnare the participants and drain their willpower. But the group's unified spirit held strong, their combined energy creating a barrier that weakened the Binding Father's hold. In a final, desperate push, Marcus and Eliza channeled the collective strength of the group into the heart of Binding. The artifact shattered once more, this time releasing a brilliant light that dispelled the lingering darkness. The Binding Father's essence was finally eradicated, his connection to the building severed permanently. Exhausted but triumphant, the group emerged from the tunnels as the storm subsided, the first light of dawn breaking through the clouds. The Midwest Customer Solutions office was free from any residual dark magic, its employees unaware of the battle fought in the shadows to secure their peace. Daniel, now a vital part of the team, marveled at the resilience and unity displayed by his colleagues. "I guess some things are better left as legends," he mused, though a lingering sense of unease hinted that not all secrets had been fully laid to rest. As the office returned to its routine operations, the bond between Marcus, Eliza, and their fellow survivors grew stronger, fortified by the trials they had endured together. They knew that while the Binding Father's reign had ended, the lessons learned would forever shape their understanding of love, sacrifice, and the unseen forces that sometimes lurk just beyond the veil of the ordinary. And so, the Midwest Customer Solutions call center continued its operations, a beacon of resilience in the face of darkness. But on certain nights, when the wind howled and the shadows danced just beyond the office windows, the employees couldn't help but feel that somewhere, something was watching, waiting for the next opportunity to challenge their hard-won peace.